Will you talk about judgment?
Judgment days are coming. The most important thing is to be able to discriminate between judgment and discernment. So, discernment, absolute clear seeing, is a quality of this alive aware reality that we have embodied more or less. So we have more or less clarity or more or less confusion or cloudiness in our discriminating between what's helpful for us, what's not helpful for us, who is helpful to hang out with, who isn't, what circumstances are helpful, what are not. Those kinds of discriminations or discernments are all functional. They have absolutely no moral or ethical judgment attached to them whatsoever, if we're talking about this tradition. Other traditions might be different. Everything in this tradition is done from a functional perspective of what is going to help us relax and open our senses and discover who we really are and what is going on here, what is actually going on here. So every choice that we make, if we're being practitioners, is about that. We're making functional decisions, and to do that, we need a lot of clear seeing. What gets in the way of our clear seeing, of course, is compulsive patterns. So they have energy, and that's when we have a clear perception, and then we start second guessing ourselves and worrying about it and get into a muddle. And then, of course, I've talked many times about, especially for women, how having clear seeing and simply acting on it is often criticized. So you'll hear women claiming they're confused when they're actually not, sort of hiding behind the curtain of confusion so as not to be criticized for being clear, or being clear and then coming up with a whole lot of excess stuff around why they think that and why it's okay and why no one should be mad about it. So judgment is usually we're saying something is right or wrong in some kind of absolute way, or we're saying that someone is good or bad in some particular way, or we're saying things about others that, or thinking or feeling things about others that cause more separation. So I can say someone is being harmful. I can use my clear seeing and my discernment to say that somebody's behavior is harmful. Or, if someone's really violent, that someone should be separated so they don't hurt people. I can use my discernment that way, but I don't have to condemn the person. And in this tradition, God, aka this alive aware reality, is not punishing. So in this tradition, there's no concept of sin. And ultimately, there's no concept of right versus wrong. There is only goodness. So goodness without a second. There's functional decisions that we make. It's not like anything goes. But those decisions are not based on some absolutist or dogmatic kind of moralism or ethics, because everything here is made of that one subjectivity, that one alive awareness. So anything that's happening is that playing at whatever's happening. So there's no actual judgment to be made. We only make judgments out of a feeling of separation and all the vulnerability that comes with. So, for instance, a very common thing that happens is people feel badly about themselves. And so they want other people to also feel badly about themselves. Or they feel threatened in some way. And so they separate off into clumps based on whatever, a neighborhood, a family is one of these clumps, some sort of identity of some sort, and they clump together and then criticize and judge everybody else. That's based on that fundamental sense of separation and threat. If we don't feel separate from anything, then there's not really any threat. And one of the, I think, bitter medicines, as Lakshmanji puts it, the bitter medicine of waking up and discovering that all of the little pleasures you got judging other people and stomping around and complaining about how other people are wrong or bad or something, whatever you think they are, in this way that's not functional, in this way that's more about self-definition. You're defining yourself against other people. And so that's a bitter medicine to understand that none of that has any basis in the absolute nature of reality, that all of those judgments are relative. Even the most standard accepted judgments of the Abrahamic traditions, like that someone who murders someone else is a bad person, or that evil exists, or that punishment is deserved. So it's a bitter medicine for some people to wake up enough to recognize that none of these things hold water with God. And I always like to use the example of punishment because I think it's relatively easy to, if you have a certain amount of open-heartedness, it's relatively easy to achieve dissonance or distance from the idea that we should be punishing each other. And again, it's not to say that some people don't need to be separated because they're harmful, but this idea of punishment, who do we think we are really, going around punishing people? What is punishment really? What are we actually punishing? We're punishing someone for being limited. We're punishing someone for being in pain. We're punishing someone for responding to an environment that they have no control over. Even in ordinary terms, without any spiritual tradition attached to it, the idea of punishment makes no sense whatsoever. It is really a religious idea that has infected secular society, that we have a right to punish people for their wrongdoings, or that it's any kind of a solution. I don't know that even that many people think it's a solution. They just think you did something wrong, you deserve punishment. What does that mean? People who get to the point where they've done something that would garner punishment have already been punished by whatever conditions they were in that led to that moment. And what people need is reintegration. They need inclusion. They need love. They need to feel valued. Punishment is absolutely counterproductive for anything we might want for a humane society. So I think it's easy to kind of grok that on some level, but it's harder to let go of our feelings like someone else is wrong or bad or maybe even evil. You don't need even any religious tradition to just open your heart and realize that people are not evil. They're just responding to things. So we have to give up our judgments. And that's very bitter medicine because we enjoy our judgments. Just on an energetic level, we enjoy stomping around and judging other people, but we also enjoy the sense of security that judging other people gives us, the sense of rightness. And there's no one who's a more harsh judge than those who are harshly judging themselves, because that is so painful that it often gets pushed off onto other people. There's no one who's more angry and hating of others than those who are angry and hating of themselves.
So in this tradition, crime or theft, crime would not be punished. It would be kind of given Like, what would be like the nature of justice then?
Well, justice is, I think, secondary to recognizing the intrinsic value of everyone. So justice is something that we have to consider and enact and embody when we don't have an innate feeling for the intrinsic value of everything. If we were just in general more awake and more in touch with that indestructible value of everything and everyone, we would naturally care for each other. We would naturally feel devotion toward each other. And 99% of those situations would never arise because people would feel cared for and valued. And most of those situations of crime arise from people literally not being cared for or valued, not having a foundation for life that allows them to feel like they have a place. So given that we don't have that situation, we don't have a situation where everyone is intrinsically valued, we need justice. Justice is the relative thing. And yeah, this tradition is, at least on paper, committed to equality and equal participation, whether that was actually embodied by the ancient practitioners in this tradition. I think it wasn't, but at least in the scriptures it says that. So we have a chance where we can better embody that, right? But I think that as a spiritual community, it really boils down to actually doing the work where you actually feel the value of everyone. Because, you know, our community is involved in an initiative to become better able to create a welcoming environment for people with different identities, as we call them these days, right? And there's lots of websites where you can go and find, you know, how to talk correctly when you're talking about stuff like this. And they're very formulaic. I mean, it's not like they're not helpful, but they're formulaic. You can just, it's, you know, as somebody said, it's kind of like fake it till you make it. But in this kind of tradition, we are actually trying to do the real work of going in there and finding opening our hearts and finding those pathways to actually caring, actually welcoming, actually loving, actually valuing. And, you know, as humans, we're going to do that in a stumbly way because, you know, we're all mixed bags. But that is, I think, the job of a spiritual community, is to do that. And along the way, we can use the tools, you know, that are more within the umbrella of justice. But we can't stop there. That isn't enough. I don't think that that actually does the trick.
It's interesting that you mentioned, like, you know, the fear of being criticized as like a gendered dynamic. And I had a recent experience where I was afraid to kind of speak my clarity in a gendered situation. And then I was reflecting on it. It was like, wow, that's such a burden to carry, because you think about, like, I should have just said something. I should have just said something. And then
Right.
Like, you know, and then you're holding on to something that was way overdue. It wasn't spontaneous.
Well, here's the thing. The solution isn't to try to feel like you aren't going to be criticized, because you are going to be criticized.
Right.
It's like having the gumption to just do it anyway. You know, that's really what it comes down to, because I can tell you, as a 63-year-old woman who's very outspoken, that you will be criticized. You will get pushback. And you find ways, especially as a practitioner, you find ways of talking to people that get more to their heart, so that there's not so much of that, right? So what women normally do is they don't talk, or they'll say stuff in this extremely roundabout way, right? trying to placate everybody and, you know, massage everybody's ego and be non-threatening and all that kind of stuff. Boy, that's exhausting, right? It's exhausting not to say what you want to say, and it's exhausting to say it in that way. But there is another thing, which is feeling into the sandhi of the situation, feeling into the gap, feeling into the heart, and speaking in there. It doesn't always work. You still sometimes get pushback, or maybe a lot, but every now and then you can strike the point and say what you want to say and not get the pushback. Yeah. So try being in the state of your practice when you're doing that and just see what happens.
Okay. Thanks.
If you really love everybody, you don't get as much pushback. And that's a tall order. It takes a lot of practice to actually love everyone. And you still don't have control over everyone. So I can love everyone, you know, to the max, and some people are still going to be mad at me. That's just the way life is, right? So we just have to be okay with that and do our thing. It's harder when you're your age, right? You're just starting out. I did not feel this way when I was your age, just saying. I grew into it. So we actually never have any reason for judging anyone in the way that I was talking about earlier, other than our own feeling of separation. There is no other reason. Nobody ever deserves it. It's never appropriate. There's never an okay reason, although we do it because we still experience separation. So neither should we flagellate ourselves, but just to understand that it is never warranted, ever. You're basically God judging God, which makes no sense. So this is Satsang, and you can ask any question you like about anything. Except for things in the DMV manual now.
A new category.
Do you remember when you asked me something about the DMV manual?
Well, I'll ask you if
Oh wait, no, don't start again. I don't know. I don't.
what cell phone ticket.
Oh.
Yeah, talking on cell phone. I still don't have the answer.
Well, it's online, believe me.
Still seeking.
Still seeking.
I have a personal spiritual question, which is, which I'm sitting on it right now, is a force, almost like a, within me, often arises very strongly to doubt and or abdicate, like completely give up, have this sense of futility of it, or lack of any substantial benefit derived, or like looking at the world and looking at the facts and the way, of history of man, and it's just certain sense of like, just dooms. It's like a futile venture to delve into the state of spiritual practice and attain some higher spiritual goal, which is good in a way, but there's sometimes I'm surprised that there is a certain force that arises and just wants to not believe or doubt or destroy even all the things that I even have put in place in terms of my ideas and books and beliefs, and it's almost like I'm not sure if it comes from a disease, infection, or if it comes from outside of me, or if it comes just from my own conditioning of my karmic, conditionings and all, where this comes from. But despite having all the aspirations and sense of gratitude for having the faith that sustained me through a very bad part of my illness, I still kind of rebel against it.
Well, just to quote you, ideas, books, and beliefs will not sustain you.
Okay.
And I think you're basically running into a couple of different things. One is you're still recovering from illness,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and it's just going to take a long time to get your native energy back.
Yeah.
And when we feel depleted, that can cause feelings of hopelessness. And
Yeah.
what's the point? Futility,
Yeah.
right? Futility is a very common feeling when you're depleted. So whatever steps you're taking to build up your adrenals and just, you know, get your system back together after such a serious long illness, though that will help.
Okay.
And then there might be something in your astrology, you know, that indicates rebelliousness. I definitely have that in my astrology. And you could go to a good Jyotish astrologer and maybe get a remedy for, you know, a more astrological remedy that might help with that, or some advice about that, because that could have been something that you were born with, and now you're noticing that it's an obstacle in your path, right? The other thing I was going to say is think about the spiritual practitioners who you really particularly admire and how they are. So it's not about what we accomplish spiritually. And it's not about like fixing ourselves or fixing the world.
Yeah.
If you look at the most accomplished spiritual people,
Yeah.
they're just having a better time. So, you know, the Dalai Lama, for instance, is always giggling, right? He's just having a better time.
Yeah.
And I think that is a good goal for you, rather than some bigger spiritual accomplishment, to just be having a better time, right? To be enjoying more, to be laughing more, to take things a little more lightly, to be able to make connections with people in a more comfortable way. Those are good goals for everyone, rather than some bigger thing that we're probably 99% of us are going to fail at anyway. I mean, you know, if our goal is some grand spiritual thing, how many people have that? You know, not that many. So our real goal should be to just enjoy life more, and through like lightening our being, right? Lightening our suffering. But certainly one thing I've noticed about all of my favorite spiritual teachers is that they all laugh a lot. They all have a feeling of lightness of life about them. Whereas really like, spiritual life, it's so serious. So I think there's a lot you can do to try to move yourself into a place where just having a better time feels like a good goal to you.
Yeah. Okay. I think that makes sense.
Om. Did you say Om? Okay, Om back at you.
Thank you. That spoke to me also, because I just came through an illness, and at the end of the illness, I got triggered and went from very happy to the in the cesspool, going through the dark night of the soul. And one of the things that keeps coming up for me is all the homeless. It just breaks my heart, and I want to solve it. And I can't.
We should always be modest in our goals of what we can do. Because when we have grand goals, like I want to solve homelessness, then we don't do anything because it's too big, and then we feel like crap. So you could give money to organization, you know, or you could, you know, be sweet and loving to homeless people that you meet. You could work in a nonprofit that works on homelessness if you really want to do something big. But even that is a small drop in the bucket. I used to work in housing and homelessness when I lived in the Bay Area before, when I was in my 30s. And I worked, there was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people working on housing and homelessness in the Bay Area, and I'm sure there's just as many now, if not more. And we still have a housing crisis, and the numbers of homeless people on the street are worse. So we should do things because we want to, but as the Bhagavad Gita says, we have to let go of the result. Right? Attachment to the result is where suffering is. I'll tell you that the older I get, the more I feel content just being able to be kind to random people I meet. Today, I was thinking about that. Again, because our community's been talking a lot about like identity-based violence and how we can relate to that better, be more welcoming and more nuanced. And I had been saying that it's most important to be loving and kind. Like we can have all these fancy ways of learning about things, but it's most important to be loving and kind in a real way. And I'm always struck by how that is so appreciated by people who have experienced a lot of identity-based violence. So I was in the parking lot. This is all preamble till I was in the parking lot at Good Earth. And there were no parking spaces. Everyone was just kind of circling around like vultures. And I had this really great parking space. And I saw this couple in a car. They were both African American, and they were looking for a parking space. And I yelled out to them, "I'm about to get out of this spot right here. Come on over." And, they said, "Okay, thanks, but we're actually trying to leave. We're not looking for a space." And then they drove by me and they said, "That was just so sweet. Thank you." And, we often think we have to do some giant thing, but really all we need to do is be loving and kind. At the end of the day, we do have to educate ourselves because we have to understand our own experience and other people's experiences better. We have to be more empathetic. We have to understand the specificity of people's experience so that we know we can make better discernments about how to relate to people. But at the end of the day, it's about kindness. At the end of the day, it's about genuine valuing of people, genuine expressions of kindness and love, more than anything else. And I've just found this consistently after pretty much a lifetime of working in social justice and doing stuff like that. I just have found that consistently. It really is about that in the end. And there's a lot of structural things that need to happen. But when we're talking about on a day-to-day level, we need to get beyond fear. We need to get beyond everything and just be able to genuinely, spontaneously open our hearts to people. And that's very simple. And it's so satisfying,
Yeah. Yeah, simple is the way to go. Easy, yeah.
It takes, what more can we do, right? What more can we do? I was reading something for some Zen teaching just the other day, but I can't remember. It was by a woman teacher at the Zen Center who's passed away. I don't know, when someone was complaining about they couldn't do some giant thing, and she just said, "Who do you think you are?"
That hit me too. Yeah.
What was
she
that?
was saying? She felt invisible.
Yeah. When someone was
Zenji Earthling was saying.
Yes, someone was trying to deal with feeling not recognized, saying, "I don't feel recognized." And her teacher, this was someone in training to be a Zen priest, her teacher said, "Who do you think you are that you need all this recognition?" But I think the same thing applies in so many circumstances. Like, we complain and we say, "Oh, I can't fix this and I can't fix that and I feel so terrible about it." But really, who do we think we are, right? All we really can do is all we really have to work with is what's right in front of us. I was actually thinking on the way back from Good Earth, maybe I should just start hugging people. I've always kind of poo-pooed the whole hugging thing, but maybe I should start. I don't know.
Yeah, I think people are lacking human touch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one time, also in a grocery store, ran into a young woman who was a sister of somebody who had come to teachings down that. And she just looked really, really sad. She's in her 20s or maybe early 30s. And I just said, "You look like you're having a really hard time." And she nodded. And I just said, "Would you mind if I give you a hug?" She didn't even know me. And I just gave her this big bear hug, and we were right at the checkout. We just like stood there for a few minutes. And that was the end of that. Yeah. Everything okay on there?
Everything's good.
Excellent. So we can do more of that. And it's very satisfying to do that. Do you have any question?
I have a question. So you were talking about judgment and how we do it to self-define.
Mm-hmm.
I was remembering a conversation I was having with Baladas early in the morning, and I was saying that with all these topics about race, I just don't feel the inspiration to like get on it, finish the book, like read books like you guys do.
Mm-hmm.
And like I was saying, I don't think I have the intellectual acumen. I was saying stuff of that sort, and I was wondering if that fits in the judgment, self-defining.
Mm-hmm. Sure, we all have little taglines that we say about ourselves. You know, that maybe we heard them from our parents, maybe we heard them from a teacher, maybe we just came up with it on our own. Maybe it's a reason just to not do something. But eventually, you know, as they say, whatever mask you put on can define your face. So it's really better not to have those kind of taglines about oneself. You can just say you're not interested. Obviously, to say you're not, but did you say you're not intellectual enough? Is that
Yeah,
what you
intellectual
said?
acumen, yeah. To like
Yeah, I
pursue
mean-
those things or not feeling inspired enough to follow those things.
Yeah, I think, you know, in your case, it's there's all kinds of things that go into that. I don't think it's about intellectual acumen. I mean, you have an advanced degree and you're doing highly smart work. So I don't know what other way to say that, but there's probably a lot of things going into it. Maybe you feel some resentment. Why should I have to do this? I think there's quite a number of people who feel stuff like that. I shouldn't have to do this. You feel that? You can be true. You can be honest.
A little bit of that.
Yeah.
And also I feel tired. I don't feel like I have enough time for myself even
Yeah.
at times.
Mm-hmm. Well, no one has to do anything. They don't want to. I mean, the most important thing, again, is that we become genuinely kind, genuinely able to connect to other people, genuinely seeing the unique dimension of other people, genuinely getting our heads out of our butts, genuinely becoming other-focused, not self-focused. So these are the important things. However you get there, I don't care. Right? But to me, the whole exercise of the community or the project that we're embarking on is really about, you know, another vector for genuinely seeing other people and learning how to really care for people, just like anything else we do. Okay, it's not a standalone thing. It's not like a special thing. It's just another way to do that. And I don't really care how anyone does it, but that's what this is about, right? It's becoming less self-concerned. Because the self that we're concerned about is very limited. Less self-concerned, more big S self-curious. the hothouse of self-concern at this particular period in history, in this particular country, in this particular kind of group. It's just suffocating, you know, it's just suffocating. It's suffocating you all, you know.
Yeah, and like I was thinking, just like you were saying, like genuine curiosity and kindness, just like the feeling of experiencing just like kindness, performative or like performative kindness is just like, oh, I'd rather people just be mean to me.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, that's a hallmark of the direct realization traditions. It's like keeping it real. And that's why they're often a bit rough and tumble, right? Because people are encouraged to kind of let it all hang out so that we can work with whatever's there.
Something struck me in the last thing you said about like looking at your privilege, and I realized that I've been thinking about it more as like something I have to do to like work on myself, but it's like really I have a desire to feel more connected to other people for real and have more intimacy with other people, and sometimes I feel like that's not really talked about. Like the work of looking at privilege opens you up to real intimacy with people. It's not like to fix something you're doing wrong so that you can be right in your vacuum
and not get criticized.
Yeah, not get criticized.
Not have anyone's anger directed at you.
It's actually like so you can really relate to people instead of relating through your weird lens that like we get.
Yeah, sitting in a room of white people in their little bubble, anxietizing about their privilege. I'm sorry, but that's just like another version of centering themselves.
Yeah.
And it's just so self-focused. It's like, yeah, you want to notice things, but then, you know, move on.
Yeah.
Like, start treating people better. You know? Stop whining. It's like the same thing that our culture teaches us to do, which is like our problems are our social currency.
Yeah.
You know, our deficits are our social currency. And the same thing's being done with privilege. It's like, it's so heavy, and not the energy is not getting out to anyone to make any connection, really.
That helped feel mine. I want that intimacy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, basically, privilege makes us mistreat people and not understand people and not understand the impact of our behavior and words on people, and therefore reduces intimacy with people. Because did everyone see that video, that Taylor Swift video?
Mm-hmm. Oh my God.
It's this real like takedown of male privilege and misogyny in the music industry, but she's playing the part of a man in it. She's like all dressed up as a man with, I think there's some CGI involved too, because her nose looks totally different.
No, they show a little thing at the end of the video where it's like how much they had to do to make her look like that.
I know.
They did a really good job. It was like the Wolf of Wall Street.
I know, it was incredible. But
is it Saturday Night Live?
No, Taylor Swift is like a pop music star.
Oh, okay.
It's just her thing that she did. What's it called?
Called the song's called The Man. And
Yeah,
it's all about like what her career would be like if she was male.
Mm-hmm. But in the last like quarter of the video, you start seeing other people around the margins, you know, like a woman going,
Yeah.
That was great. And some gay guy, you know, going, so I think that's what happens, you know, when you have unexamined privilege. The people that don't have that privilege, that see it every day, everywhere, in all their interactions, they're just rolling their eyes at you. So you're not really relating to them. They're like, oh, whatever. It definitely cuts back on intimacy when we don't understand the impact of our behavior or the assumptions that we're making or the ways that we're not valuing people. Like one of the lines in the video is she's saying, if I were a man, I would be this, I would be that, you know, I would be. And one of the things she said was, I would be believed. I would be believed. And then she sort of breaks the frame and says, like, something like, can you believe it? You know, or something. And maybe that's in the Tiny Desk version. Okay. Did you see it? Okay. And certainly one of the greatest privileges that all people with privileges exercise is the privilege to say what is to be believed and what is not, or what is accurate and what is not, or what is valuable or important and what is not. And this gets to like the workplace where different people are talking, and if you're one of the people who doesn't have privilege, people are saying things to you like, well, I don't think that's the way it really is, or, well, actually, blah, 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 you know, and then, you know, and then all of a sudden they become the definers. Like the power of definition is huge. I don't think that's what really happened. I mean, you know, how many times do you hear that? A lot. And then it's like you don't have the right to your own experience, which is one of the reasons why we devalue our experience so much. Why we think, oh, it's just my experience. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it wasn't that way. You know, we get all uncertain about ourselves, even just about our own direct experience.
It's a very jangly experience.
Yeah. You say jangly?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is jangly. Are there any other questions from out there?
I have a question kind of in the same direction, but completely different. I just went through this dark night of the soul, and when I looked really deep, what became clear to me was a sense of rejection. And just recently, and I don't know if this is true or not, I see the opposite as acceptance. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, I don't know, but if there's anything you'd like to say about that.
Yeah, well, rejection and acceptance are relative experiences. They have to do with your experience of separation. So as if you could be rejected or as if you could be accepted. And the fact of the matter is that you are already always included. You are already always accepted. You are already always never rejected. You were born in this body. You were born in this realm. You belong here 100%, same as everybody else. And you are 100% included already. So when we can feel that, then what anyone else does is like weather, right? Maybe we have to get our umbrella out or put on our galoshes now and then, but, or shelter in place or something, because weather can get bad. But the inner feeling of this is my world, this is my, I was put here in this reality and I belong here always without question. And I'm just as valuable as anything or anyone else. That's where we want to find our refuge.
And how do you get there when you've gotten to this deep place of rejection? How do you get back up?
Well, it's not really an up or a down. It's going, yeah. You might want to try, there's a meditation. I don't know what your experience is. Maybe you're very experienced, but there's
I'm very old.
There's a meditation on the website called Breath Immersion in the Golden Egg.
Say it again.
Breath Immersion and the Golden Egg. It's on the meditation page of the website. And it's a way of getting in touch with your intrinsic value.
Thank you.
I love this conversation today. I'm so glad that we talked about judgment, or that you talked about judgment. And now talking about privilege and specifically sexism, which has been noticing a lot lately, like just how angry and even hateful at times I feel toward men, especially if they exercise their privilege and can't the fragility, if they're called out on it and they can't receive it. Many men can receive it, but many men can't. And I feel deeply judgmental, and I don't totally. That's where I feel like I reach kind of a wall in my ability to be in the state of my practice, and I feel very separate, and I feel very angry, and I feel very judgmental about that, and I don't totally know where to go with that.
Well, the good news is you have time. When I was your age, I also felt very judgmental and very angry. As long as you recognize, or if you can find within yourself a place that doesn't want to feel that wants to be able to feel the common thread between you and people who are behaving that way. And again, I'm not talking about acceptance. I'm just talking about experiencing another person as also being of value and also suffering. You don't have to do that, but try to find a place within yourself that wants to do that. The seed of change is desire. It's okay to be angry. I mean, it's probably inevitable. So it doesn't matter whether it's okay or not, but it's okay to be angry. It's okay to express that anger. It's okay to be unreasonable. But if you're going to work with this as a practitioner, you have to try to find that seed of desire to relate and experience male aspects differently at some point. Not now. That's the beginning.
Not now.
No, I'm saying if not now, obviously you can't just snap your fingers and feel something other than what you actually feel. And I think that being really angry is a great next step after being, I'm not saying this is you, I'm just talking in general now, but being unaware or just suffering with only semi-consciousness about these things, or being really angry is a good next step. But recognize it's not the ultimate. It's not where spiritual life takes us. It's not where it drops us off. That's not the goal. It's just some station you're passing through on the way. And as I've said a lot of times in Satsang, it is just such a relief to love everyone, regardless of what condition they're in. It feels energizing and good to be angry on some level, but it doesn't feel nearly as good as being able to love everyone.